It's the summer of 1953. A group of boys arrive at a summer camp in Middle Grove, New York. They don't know they're inside an experiment. They don't know the counselors are researchers. And they don't know the man watching them has already decided how their story ends. Two tribes at war. There's just one problem. The boys refuse to play along. You've been told that us versus them is human nature, that you can take any two groups, set them against each other, and hostility is inevitable. The proof is one of the most famous experiments in the history of psychology. But that experiment had a prequel. The textbooks skip it, and the prequel proves the opposite.
So the real question isn't whether we're born to divide into tribes. It's what one scientist did when the children told him we're not.
The man is Muzafer Sherif, Turkish-American, one of the founding figures of social psychology, and not a monster. As a young man, Sherif had watched the Ottoman Empire collapse around him, watched neighbors turn on neighbors along lines that had barely existed the year before. He spent the rest of his life trying to understand how ordinary people become enemies. By the 1950s, with the Cold War tightening, he believed he finally had the answer. He called it realistic conflict theory. The idea is clean. Groups don't turn hostile over ancient grudges or bad character. They turn hostile when they're forced to compete for something both of them want. Compete and you hate. That was the whole theory. And Sherif had already begun testing it. A first rough camp in 1949. Then, in 1953, funded and confident, he builds the real one at Middle Grove, New York. Take ordinary boys, split them into two groups, manufacture a competition. Then, step back and watch human nature do the rest. He is certain he already knows what he'll find.
Here's what the textbooks never mention. The conflict was never meant to happen on its own. It was staffed. Sherif's researchers weren't only watching. They were embedded as counselors. And part of their job was to provoke, to engineer friction the boys would mistake for their own. A prize dangled in front of both groups. A tournament tilted toward resentment. In one camp, a hunting knife sat on the dining hall mantel as the grand prize, gold in the eyes of every boy in the room. The whole design rested on a single assumption. Tilt the conditions far enough, and the children will supply the hatred themselves. It was a machine built to produce enemies, but a machine only works if the parts cooperate. The Middle Grove boys had done something Sherif didn't plan for. They'd met early. Before the friction phase even began, they'd mixed, made friends across the very lines he was trying to draw between them. And children, it turns out, are not easy to fool. They noticed the counselors steering them, the stage disappointments, the insults that arrived a little too conveniently, the adults always nearby when something went wrong. And instead of turning on each other, they turned on the grown-ups. They compared notes across the two groups. They said it out loud, accused the experimenters of rigging the camp against them. And then they cooperated, deliberately, to wreck the whole thing. Sherif wanted two tribes at war. What he got was a room full of kids, united, asking him what he was really doing there. None of it made the official record. We know it happened at all because decades later, the psychologist Gina Perry found it in Sherif's own archived field notes. For Sherif, this wasn't a fascinating result. It was a disaster. The experiment hadn't captured human nature. It had captured children seen straight through the man studying them. So the 1953 study was cut short, written off. And then it did something quieter and stranger. It vanished. It was never published as a finding. It never reached a textbook. For over 60 years, almost no one knew Middle Grove had happened at all. The record of the summer the boys refused to hate each other sat in an archive, untouched. Until Perry dug it out and reconstructed the whole thing for her 2018 book, The Lost Boys. A year after the failure, Sherif went looking for a do-over. 1954, Robbers Cave State Park, Oklahoma. Same premise, one crucial change. This time, the boys never met first. Sherif kept the two groups completely apart at the start, long enough for each to harden into a tribe before it ever saw the other. No cross-group friendships, no chance to compare notes. And this time, his researchers kept their hands off the clumsy provocations that had exposed them the year before. Two groups, the Rattlers and the Eagles. Kept apart, then introduced, then dropped into a tournament with trophies and medals only one side could win. And this time, it worked. First, the name-calling. Then one group burned the other's flag. The other stormed their cabin after dark and turned it inside out. Boys filled socks with stones in case they needed weapons. Counselors had to physically break up fistfights. Two sets of ordinary 11-year-olds, screened beforehand as normal, well-adjusted kids, turned into something close to enemies in a matter of days. Then Sherif proved the second half of his theory. He forced the groups to cooperate, staged a break in the camp's water supply only teamwork could fix, a truck that wouldn't start until both groups hauled it together. The hostility faded. Shared goals dissolved the war he had built. This is the version Sherif published in 1961 with his collaborators, including his wife and partner in the work, Carolyn Wood Sherif, as Intergroup Conflict and Cooperation, the Robbers Cave Experiment. This is the version that became a classic, the one in your textbook, the proof that we are wired for tribalism. But look at everything it took to produce that proof. To show that boys naturally fracture into warring tribes, Sherif had to stop them from meeting his friends first. He had to strip out the conditions that let the 1953 kids catch him. He had to run it again, on a stacked deck. And he had to bury the summer that gave the wrong answer. Robbers Cave shows that competition can breed hostility. That part is real. But the conclusion hiding underneath is the one that never made the textbook. The hostility was not automatic. It had to be built. And the one time the children could see it being built, they took it apart in an afternoon. The boys who proved that cooperation was every bit as natural as conflict, maybe more so, didn't become the science. They became the failed trial, the data left in the box. We were handed a story about ourselves, that underneath the manners were tribal animals, one bad tournament away from turning on each other. It gets taught as settled fact. It gets reached for to explain everything from schoolyard cliques to war. But the most famous evidence for it is a result a man had to manufacture. Twice, after reality, given a fair chance, kept handing him the opposite. The first time, the children refused, so he changed the rules until they couldn't.